Hi guys, this is Zero. How's everyone doing today? So today I'm going over how to change from your past, okay? Truly, how to change from your sexual past, okay? That's the example that I'm going to kind of focus on in this video, okay? I'm focusing on that because one, in my opinion, that's one of the more important things to focus on in regards of change, right? Because everyone wants to, get married and all that stuff and improve their success rate in marriage, especially in this day and age where the success rate is at an all-time low. But just one thing, this is a very important topic, okay? There's a lot of generic nonsense information on the internet that kind of only deals with one part of you, but that has absolutely no effect on other parts of you, or even negative effects, which could kind of even worsen the problem. Okay, so in order for me to go through all that, I don't know how long this video is going to be, but it's definitely going to be at least over 10 minutes. Okay, so you're just going to have to bear with me here if you really want to hear my opinion. Okay, yeah, so today I'm talking about how to truly change from your sexual past. Okay, there's different parts of you. Okay, there's your upper self and your lower self. Okay, and even your upper self is comprised of a few different parts of you, right? Like your religious, spiritual, intuitive, and your lower self is comprised of your physical, mental, emotional, right? I'm basically getting this from your lower chakras and your upper chakras, right? And for more information on this, I have this video called Lower Chakra Theory video, right? Where it's completely a personal opinion of mine, right? At least as far as I know. But it basically describes why these are this and why these are that, right? So I'm not going to be covering that here. That you can watch that video. That's a whole nother, segment of information, right? And actually, just before I go into the video, right? We have this concept here in the West called born again Christian, right? Other religions have the same thing, right? Like in Hinduism, we have this. I'm pretty sure in Islam they have something like this, right? Where basically, if somebody were to convert to the religion, like after childhood or after teenage years, or somebody were to take the religion more seriously, right? They are basically going through some religious ceremony or procedure in order to like wipe away their past, right? Or like wash away their sins, right? There's multiple, variety of like ways of wording this concept, but the point is you're basically rebirthing yourself, right? And that's great, right? That's a wonderful thing. You're doing your best, etc. However, if you take a person who's kind of gone down that process in their 20s, right? Let's just say somewhere between 20 and 30. We can just call it 25, right? For right now, right? Like mid 20s. And so they did that at 25. And let's just call this person B, right? And then you have another person A, right? They've been kind of on this path since birth or like early childhood, right? Like pre-teenage years or even early teenage years. Even though person B is doing the best they can, there's still going to be a difference between person B and person A, right? I know people that have been like very, very strict or very, very, on, I guess you can say like the right path or the proper path. And there's a difference between them and people who are on it much later, right? For reasons that I'll get into in a second. But you can't, just because person B's trying their best, right, which is great, you can't acknowledge the fact that you can't not acknowledge, the fact that someone who's done this for a very, very long time and that knows nothing else is in a completely different and possibly more, better or benefic mindset. All right, so that's just something that you have to acknowledge right at the jump. If you don't agree with that, then you might as well just turn this video off right now. Okay. But now the question is, okay, right, there's a difference, right? But what can person B do, right, to reap some of the benefits that person A has? Or what can person B do to, I guess you can say, adapt and accept and deal with their situation a lot better, right? Because a lot of the advice I see on the internet, it's very generic and it only really deals with one part of themselves, right? There's many different parts of yourself. You have to tackle them all a little bit differently, right? But when you have all these, generic buzzwords and things like that, I mean, it could help you in some areas, but it's not going to help you in other areas, right? And actually, sometimes if you apply that advice in other areas, it's actually going to hurt you, okay? And I use this example of somebody who's religious, right? But whether you're religious or not, I think at some point in time, in like your midlife sometime, you're going to try to change or transform yourself or something, right? So hopefully this concept can apply, right? I know a lot of people who aren't necessarily religious, but they still have a goal of having, a successful marriage and things like that, and kind of just moving on with their life from their past in their childhood and certain other things in their youth, right? And I actually made a video like 4 or 5 videos ago. It was basically me explaining how, in my spiritual perspective, there basically, as you increase your number of premarital sexual partners, your success at marriage, basically your marital success rate, can kind of go down, right? And this is just my opinion, and I use the word can, right? I didn't say will, I said can, right? So, but now it's like, okay, what do you do about that, right? Like, you know that there was a problem, right? There's possibly, correlation showing this, and that, there was certain things have been done, right? But now how do you properly adjust to the situation, right? So that's what I'm going to go over today. Now, you have a lower self and your upper self, right? So your lower self, like I said, is comprised of your physical, mental, and emotional, and your upper self is comprised of your religious, spiritual, intuitive, right? For more information on all these and why these are the way they are, watch my video. It's called Lower Chakra Theory video. Okay, just search that with my name. It'll pop up. It's no one else, I don't think, has ever used that thing, because I made it up. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's not good or anything. Your lower self is more ego-based and more rigid. Your upper is more soul-based and dynamic. Okay, so basically your upper chakras, right? They're constantly you can replace certain things, you can change certain things a lot more quickly, right? At a spiritual level, things are happening so fast, and so they're a lot more dynamic. However, at a lower chakra, right, they're not. They're more rigid, right? So you can't just change stuff like that, right? And these two areas have to be tackled differently. Now, it's not just, these three and these three, right? As you go up, the less rigid and the more dynamic they come. And as you go down, the more rigid and less dynamic they are, right? So like, yeah, I group these three and I group these three, right? But like, this one is going to be less rigid than this one, right? So the order just going up, because I didn't write it down. It's physical, emotional, mental, and I guess for right now, very general, you can word this as like religious, spiritual, and intuitive, right? That's obviously not going to be 100% correct to everyone who you ask about what do these 6 chakras, like what they are about, but let's just call it that for right now, right? So, okay, so I already said that the lower chakras, they cannot change, right? They're not as easily changing or replaced, right? And you can kind of abstractly understand this at the physical level, right? The bottom, right? At physical bottom, you cannot change your body, right? Like, unless you can somehow change your whole body, then I'll say, okay, fine. This video is completely incorrect, right? But, the rigidness of the physical chakra is kind of represented by the fact that, you're in this body for this birth, okay? And if you go up, right, let's just say emotional, right? Everyone has a certain combination, I guess you can say a certain ratio of emotions. Now, it's not as rigid as the physical, right? Even the physical you can change, right? You can like lose fat and stuff like that, right? But there's a lot that's already kind of set in stone relative to, some of the higher chakras, right? So if you go up, right, the emotional you can change, right? But like, you notice that, like, no matter how much, things you do that make you happy or stuff like that, or things you do, like, there's a certain ratio that's always kind of going to be there. Now, you can do certain things long term to adjust that, right? Like, but at a very general sense, your emotional kind of ratio is set, right? Like, you can do things to kind of better balance it, right? Like all this meditation and things like that. That's great. And like not avoid TV and stuff to kind of avoid disrupting the balance and things like that. But that's kind of set, right? Like same thing, like the physical's kind of set, right? But there's things that you can do to enhance it, right? And we go up to the mental, right? So you can obviously change, your paradigms and things like that. That's great. But that's not really what I'm talking about, right? Like that's more on like the surface level, just like at the physical, like, just kind of losing weight or getting more in shape, right? But like there's certain things about myself that like can't change physically or take a very long time, right? Like my testosterone is not just gonna increase by 3 times tomorrow without, taking some kind of substance and just stay like that for the rest of my life, right? So same thing with the mental, right? Like there's a lot that's kind of ingrained in you and that takes a while to kind of change, right? And even the core of like, your identity and things like that, these aren't very easily adjustable. Okay. I'm not going to say, they're completely stuck, right? But I'm just trying to give you a point that these are more rigid, right? That's all I'm saying. Now the upper, you kind of get a little bit more fluid, right? And a lot of the conventional advice kind of caters towards this, right? Now, that's great that people are giving advice, but this is kind of like the easy stuff, right? And the reason I say that is because your upper self, it's a little bit connected to, I guess you can say the consciousness or God or whatever you want to call it, right? This is automatically kind of going to happen, okay? And all right, so this is kind of already automatically ongoing, right? The advice. So things like or verbiage or wording like, every day's a new day, or like things like that, right? That's great, right? I completely acknowledge it, right? You can completely change, but some stuff about you can change, and some stuff about you can't, or some stuff about you can't change that easily, okay? And that needs to be acknowledged if you have any hope, in my opinion, or a higher chance of actually tackling the root problems, right? So the root thing, right, is here, right? This is always going to be a little bit more negative, I guess you can say, just for right now in simple terms, than this, right? This is always going to be changing. And as you kind of increase your vibration and do the meditation and things like that, you can kind of automatically go like connect with the energies of here versus the energies of here, right? Which is great. So that's actually number one, right? You want to actually do all the stuff that you can to kind of keep you operating in this range versus this range, right? That's going to be number one, because I'm literally like, not connecting or harnessing, or what's that other word people use? Manifesting, right? This stuff, right? Energy is coming from here, and I'm going to do that from here instead, which is good. So that's number one, right? Do the work to actually start operating from an upper self, right? Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to tell yourself, oh, I'm this holy person and I'm pure now and all this, right? You don't want to do that, right? Because you're not actually going to your upper self. You're actually keeping yourself in a mental construct. So you're saying, okay, I'm basically going to pretend that I'm someone I'm not, and I'm like suppressing everything and running away from it, right? That's not going to work. What I'm actually asking you to do is, detach and things like that to get to the upper self, right? And that requires a lot of work, okay? Now, I said before, a lot of people, they'll give advice just in general that is really great for your upper self, but does not acknowledge anything on the lower self, right? This is going to be the holy grail of fixing any of your past problems, okay? And that is acceptance and adaptation, okay? And adaptation has to do with your internal and your external self, and I'm going to cover that right now. Acceptance, right? You need to accept a lot of things. You need to accept that whatever you did do, right? You just need to accept it, right? And you need to accept anything that possibly comes with it. Any fears that possibly come with it, right? Any fears of judgment, any fears of traumas affecting your future decisions, right? I'm not saying you accepting your fears will make that happen. I'm just saying you accepting your fears will actually make you no longer live out of negative vibrations and negative emotions, right? You need to accept, right? Accept all your fears, accept anything you don't want to happen, accept all of that, right? Accepting is going to be your best friend, because you're removing that, you're clearing it from your brain. They actually no longer have a pull on you anymore, okay? Versus if you don't accept it, you try to fight it, you try to run away. That has its place, but the first thing you need to do is you need to accept it, right? Once you kind of get going on the acceptance ball, then you can kind of do the other stuff that I'm going to describe, right? But you want to accept it. I have 1,000,001 videos on acceptance, okay? I have how to deal with anxiety, how to truly move on from a past relationship. They all cover acceptance, right? I have like so many more, okay? But the first thing you need to do is you need to accept all this stuff. And you need to really think deep. And this is where the meditation comes in, right? I pointed there because that's my little meditation spot on the floor with all my little home mandir there, okay? But you need to literally accept everything, right? And you need to at least sit for like 5 or 10 minutes if there's something that you're struggling with, and just think of anything that's popping up, any fear, anything, any person, anything about a person, any experience, anything about an experience that has to do with the person, whatever, right? You need to accept all of that, right? And just let it flow, and then it'll just go out, okay? That's the other thing. Sometimes it doesn't go out, right? You need to accept that too. Sometimes you need to just accept that hey, this person, I really like this person and they left, or this person was the best I have and they're not here and I'm not going to find anybody like that. You need to just actually accept it rather than just fighting. And, sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying that, you should overly settle or whatever and just pick whoever, right? But you need to accept these things rather than just living out of these lack-based emotions, right? Because you actually being too picky and trying to find someone that you think from an ego perspective is better than a certain person in your past, that's actually you living out of lack and you being negative than someone who's actually accepted that and can actually find, actual real healthy companionship afterwards, okay? Moving forward, right? So accept, right? So you need to accept. I think I kind of covered that a little bit. Next thing you need to adapt, okay? The reason why I say adapt, I'm going to assume here that, just for a second, that you do have a goal of getting married, okay? Even if you don't, I'll try to tie in some other stuff. Right? You need to accept, right? But like I said, a big part of accepting is possibly understanding that your life did change, right? Your mindset did change, right? Your whatever, right? There's all kinds of things that changed, and that's okay. However, as like a marital duty, right, you still have some responsibilities that you have to do in order to make it good, right? So you have to adapt yourself on the outside and the inside in order to change, okay? So basically what this means is once you accept, you need to really make it work, okay? This is not going to be just as much work that went into acceptance. You're going to need to put that amount of work into adapting, right? You need to actually try. You need to actually want, if you actually want to change, right? You need to actually try. You need to actually want the thing. You need to actually know what it takes to handle and want the thing, right? It's not just going to be a cakewalk, right? It's not like the movies. It's not like, there's a certain amount of work that comes every day, right? You're going to get tempted in the future to have all kinds of internal and external distractions, okay? You need to basically just do your part to actually, truly, make it work, right? I mean, it's up to you, okay? No, I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. Usually the lower self is missed or incorrectly handled, right? So none of this is usually talked about, right? And if it is, it's talked about at an extremely, extremely high level, right? You need to actually get in there and, do the actual real hard work when it comes to acceptance and adaptation, right? That's pretty much it, right? It's kind of like, let's just say you've had like an unhealthy diet, right? And then all of a sudden you have some health problems, right? Then and there, you have to take care of it on the spot. It doesn't matter how much you want to go off your new recommended diet, right? If you do, you're going to feel the effects immediately, right? So it's kind of like that here, right? We live in kind of like an illusionary period where like you think you can't do the work and still, get the results you want, right? That's almost not going to happen. And even if it does, there's usually still always some catch, okay? Always kind of, and for your own spiritual elevation and growth, you still want to do this anyways, even if there is some minor possibility that you can get what you want without changing, right? Now, sometimes, like I said, this stuff starts happening automatically, right? That's great, okay? That's amazing, right? But if it's not, and this is still something that you might be struggling with or something like that, I would encourage you to kind of take into implementation some of the stuff that I described here, right? Just kind of making sure and seeing that I didn't miss anything. I actually drew this yesterday, but I didn't have time to record. I had to run somewhere, but now I have time to record it. But I think that's pretty much it. All right, guys. that's it for this video. If you have any questions or comments as usual, please let me know. Till next time, I'll talk to everyone later. Thank you all very, very much for watching.